Hello, once again. It's good to be back again with Karen Plum after a gap of 2 Tuesdays, I think. As you may be aware, Karen is the Director of Research and Development at Advanced Workplace Associates. And now these 2 weeks were kind of busy, and besides other things, I actually made a few changes to my background. Now, irrespective of what background I have or the kind of online session that I'm part of, one thing remains constant for me. I always have a bottle of water handy with me, and I keep myself hydrated. And sometimes, as you know, these online sessions can be quite long, and it's always helpful to have this bottle with me. Now, interestingly, besides the common belief that hydration helps to keep our kidneys in good shape, it actually helps in cognitive fitness. Yes, it actually helps our brains function better. Now, research shows that good hydration is one of the most important things that allows high performance at work, but it is not the only one. There are a few more. Within organizations, what you're really dealing with is a network of brains. It is very important to understand how the brain really works and what can be done to keep it in a state that allows high performance at an individual level as well as within a team. Now, Karen has been researching the knowledge worker mindset for many, many years. Today, she will speak with us about what is the science behind high performance at work. As usual, she will speak for about 10 minutes and will then answer your questions. Please type in your questions in the comments section. If you're watching this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button so that you're alerted about similar sessions in the future. Over to you, Karen.
Thanks very much, Partha. And like you, I too have a water bottle handy for this session. So it looks like we're both good to go. So thank you for the warm introduction, as always, and welcome everybody to this session. I have a few slides to share with you, so I'm just going to pull those up now. And And as Partha said, for the last 6 or 7 years, we have been researching individual and team performance, trying to understand what makes us perform at our best so that we can share that information with people and help everybody to have a better day at work and to be more successful within their organization. So today what we're going to cover is a little bit about individual and team needs. Then we're going to talk about protecting the brain and indeed how the brain protects us. Share some research findings with you that we found out from the research that we've looked at. And we're going to finish up talking about the importance of the habits that we have, our personal habits. And then after my talk, we'll answer some questions. So if you've been along on the previous 10-minute talks that I've been doing with Partha, you'll know that we recently completed some research on virtual teams and how they perform at their best. And we identified these 6 different factors which are important in the performance of teams. So that's not the focus of today's talk, but there is information about these on our website and indeed in the recordings that we've put up on YouTube for the previous talks, if you're interested, or head to our workplace our website advancedworkplace.com. So today we're interested in individual needs, and this is particularly important in these difficult times that we look after ourselves and that we protect the brain, which is really at the heart of everything that we do. So in terms of protecting the brain, it's important to understand that the brain is wired for safety. Its one job in life is to keep us safe, and of course this goes back to when we lived in caves and we were surrounded by threats and things that wanted to eat us. And so it was really important that that the brain could protect us and do all that it could to conserve energy so that we were always ready to avoid the threats that were around every corner. And of course, the brain has a lot to do. A lot of the bodily systems that we have, of course, they're all running in the background. And goodness knows how many individual decisions the brain is making as it runs those systems every day. But there is also a part of our brain energy which we use for thinking and processing and remembering and all of those things that we do as part of our work. But in order to keep that energy available, the brain has developed some strategies for conserving energy and maximizing the amount that we have available for the different things that we need to do. And one of the key things that we know through neuroscience is that the brain uses a lot of prediction in order to save energy. And you can think about this in the sense of habits, which is why habits are really important and why they're difficult to break. Because the brain will predict based on what it knows or how things have happened and how they've turned out in the past. If the brain encounters a situation that it's encountered before, then it will predict that things will happen in the same way, and therefore you don't need to spend time and energy thinking about it or indeed worrying about it. However, when we encounter a situation that we are not familiar with, then the brain has to go through a bit of a longer process. It will run some simulations, some what-if scenarios, if you like, to try to work out what might happen. And then as the situation unfolds, it will compare what is actually happening with what it predicted, try to resolve whatever errors there were in the prediction, and then to bank that prediction for the future. And all of this is going on without you really realizing it. And what you can see from this diagram is that when we are aware of something, a situation we've encountered before, we consume a lot less energy through this process. But change, it actually depletes a lot of our energy. And that's really why it's important to understand the impact of situations like change, where we're undergoing change in our personal or our work life. and indeed why the period that we're living through at the moment, the last 6 or 7 months of the COVID pandemic, trying to look to the future and understand what the world's going to look like, what my world's going to look like, and how I'm going to cope with these situations is much more difficult and takes a lot more what-if scenario running. And it's also important to know that this simulation, if we're running those what-if scenarios, they consume almost as much energy as going through the situation itself. And so it's very important to recognize that when going through change, a lot of energy gets consumed, and it's no wonder that we get tired through these sorts of situations. So that's just a little background. Moving on quickly to the science and the research that we did with the Centre for Evidence-Based Management, our research partner. So the centre looked at a question which was really about understanding the factors that have the most impact on the brain's performance. And they consulted a number of different databases to find appropriate academic studies that would give us some clues as to what were the important factors here. And we're really looking for the best evidence, so the best methodology, good sample sizes, population sizes, etc., peer-reviewed research. So this isn't just the odd study here or there. There's a good body of evidence sitting behind each of the factors that I'm going to share with you in a second. So we identified over 170 studies in our original piece of work 5 years ago, which we updated this year as well. So this is current research. The studies themselves have taken place over the last 15 to 20 years. And it's all highlighted a number of factors that have a positive or a negative impact on the performance of the brain. So here are the positive things, and you'll see different size circles here. They represent the relative volume of evidence that we found when we looked at the studies. So obviously the bigger ones, there's more evidence, and smaller ones, not so much. And the colours reflect the sort of effect sizes that were identified by researchers. So the light green ones had a small to medium effect, and the darker ones a medium to large. And the small effects really are things which are really only visible through careful examination, whereas the large ones anyone can see because the effect is quite substantial. So some of these things are quite subtle, but nevertheless they're going on in the background. And here are the negative things. As you can see things like sleep and good old hydration that we've also already mentioned. There's a big body of evidence, a lot of research taking place on these types of factors. And you'll see that they also have a small to medium effect. So they're quite important and worth your time in thinking about them. Now, what the researchers did when they conducted their studies was that they looked at different domains of the brain. So there are 4 or 5 different domains that they tend to use. As you can see here, our memory, so our ability to recall things, our executive functioning, which is all about the quality of our decision making. Attention is focus and concentration, and our reaction time is obviously how quickly we react to a given stimulus. And so in looking at the factors from our previous diagram, you'll see here that we've shown them against these different brain domains so that you can see which of them are impacted from the different categories. So those are the positive ones, and you can see that some of them only affect one domain and others affect all the domains, although to a smaller degree. And here, by contrast, are the negative ones. So again, you'll see things like exercise and sleep have an impact on all of the domains, whereas other things like task interruptions or nutrition breaks tend to just be reflected in the factor which is reaction time. So we can start to think about our own practices and behaviors regarding these factors, to see what we can do to help our own brains to cope with some of the difficult situations that are going on at the moment. They may be small changes, small incremental changes, but given what our brains are having to cope with at the moment, I think it's probably worth the effort. So if we think about habits, we've got 4 here, really some ones which are really within our control at a time when so much in the world isn't within our control. Getting a good night's sleep, having breakfast, so keeping the brain fed, making sure that we're active during the day. So whether that's physical, sort of hard physical exercise, or even just being mobile during the day, shifting our position, that sort of thing, and keeping hydrated. Those are 4 things which will all help our brains. And I think we probably all know this, but perhaps we don't understand quite the impact that these things have on the brain. And the fact that in doing these will give us a better day at work. So finally, take care of your brain. And if you don't do anything else, then perhaps think about hydration. If you find yourself fuzzy-headed or unable to concentrate, try moving around, some exercise, but also try some hydration. Have half a litre of water. See if it helps. Again, for headaches, we've found lots of people have had beneficial impacts from being paying more attention to hydration. Don't wait until you're thirsty, because that's way too late. Try and bank your hydration during the day. Anyway, that's all I had to share. And Partha, let's turn to the questions.
Thanks, Karen. I mean, that was heady stuff, but the way you place it, I mean, you're always so calm and like Zen-like. It actually makes it easier for me. I was just listening to it to actually absorb what you're saying. Thanks so much, Karen.
Thank you.
Those of you who are watching this on YouTube, please type in your questions in the comments section or the chat section. I think that's the screen I'm mainly following, although this is also going out to Twitter, Facebook, and Dailymotion as well. But I have only limited brain power as well. I can only look at 2 screens.
Have a drink.
So we already have a few questions, Karen. There's a question from Uday who is asking, the brain tends to think of the worst case scenarios. How does one balance needs with situational priority, especially in a group scenario?
Okay, so the brain is wired for safety, so you can be sure that it's looking out for threats. Whether it's always looking at worst case scenarios, I think is another matter. I think there's a degree to which personality plays into that. I think some people are much more worrisome, and they will spend a lot more time running those what if scenarios than other people do. But I think in a group situation, you're transitioning from those individual needs into the group needs. And I think if you're conscious, if you know this stuff, and if you know that that sort of things like uncertainty and worry and that tendency, if you know a colleague has a tendency to go to that sort of worst case scenario, pick up on that. Be empathetic, encourage them to discuss the worries and see if you can find a solution together. I mean, I guess we're transitioning back here to the team needs. So the cohesiveness, information sharing, how we work together and support each other. But if we don't know that this stuff's going on, then we're not even paying attention to it. So I think, having it in mind is certainly helpful.
Okay. All right, thanks. We have a very interesting question. Actually, I also wanted to ask this has come from Pat. I think Pat is probably writing in from the US, and she's asking regarding the negatives, what is meant by speech? I also noticed that word speech there. I mean, how is speech a negative? Is it what our presidents and prime ministers are telling us? Is that the kind of
well, probably that as well. But yes, I think most people pick up on the speech one, and in this context, speech is a dimension of noise. So the researchers have been looking at what are the different types of noise, and what impact do they have on our brain's ability to focus and concentrate. So they looked at different types of noise, so music, background noise, speech, and intelligible speech. So speech in this context is what you can hear going on around you and the degree to which your brain finds it distracting. So what the research discovered was that if there's background buzz and you can hear voices but you can't make out individual sentences or conversations, it's much less distracting than if you can actually hear what people are saying. So if I could hear you and another colleague in the office discussing something and I can hear all parts of the conversation, then my brain is spending part of its energy following that conversation. And it's taking energy and focus away from the task that I would prefer to be working on, which is why we have so many people working in open plan offices complaining about the distraction and the difficulty of concentrating. So it's intelligible speech, which is more distracting than background noise. And the most distracting speech of all is if you can hear somebody on their mobile phone, but you can only hear part of the conversation, because again, your brain is racing away trying to figure out what the other person is saying, and you're not consciously focusing on it. Well, you might be, but you're not necessarily actively wanting to follow that conversation, but your brain is getting it as an input. Similarly with music. So music is apparently distracting, although I know a lot of people find the contrary. But again, instrumental music is less distracting than music with lyrics, because again, your brain is trying to, if you know the song particularly, you'll be anticipating the next line of the verse that's coming and whatever. So these are all things that take away part of our concentration.
And this is clearly different from what white noise is all about, because I understand that some people actually find it more comforting to work when there's a bit of a white noise around you. You can actually get music, white noise kind of music to download and put on your ears.
Yes, white noise, pink noise. Again, it's about trying to level out the peaks of the noise. I'm sure we all know, if you work in a really quiet environment or you go and sit in a library, then one noise, somebody drops something on the floor or somebody sneezes. I mean, these days, if somebody sneezes, everybody's head will pop up. But we probably all remember working in those really quiet environments when any small sound will destroy everybody's concentration, and then everybody's got to try to get back into flow again. So the thing about white noise or pink noise or whatever, it tends to smooth out all of that stuff. It gives your brain that has that sort of fuzziness around it, which will mask those more sort of sharp one-off noises, or somebody's phone ringing or whatever. So it's about trying to give the brain that sort of consistency of background noise.
All right. Yeah. So we do have questions coming in thick and fast. Please keep them coming. I have a question from Manoj, who's asking, does multitasking or focusing on multiple tasks affect the performance of the brain?
Definitely. You'll have seen task interruption on the diagram there, and all the research tells us that multitasking just isn't good. The brain, and there are techniques. I was reading about the Pomodoro technique yesterday, which is about concentrating on one thing, turning off all distractions and just focusing on one task for 25 minutes, and then having a 5-minute break and going on to the next thing. If we're constantly distracted by emails arriving, Teams messages, telephone calls, our brain is trying to go between all of these different activities, and we're spreading the amount of energy and focus that we have across all of those things. And I think we probably all know that the time that we do get to concentrate on just one thing results in us getting through it a lot quicker, because we're not distracting ourselves with those other things, particularly if those other things are easy things to check off the to-do list. They're very tempting, but they really disrupt the amount of focus and concentration. And that's really what this is all about.
Mm-hmm. There's a
So
question.
don't multitask.
I am.
You are, yes. Well, you can now.
And I quickly look at my Facebook as well, looking at YouTube as well. And there's this
Yeah.
question from Sivani on at Facebook, and she's asking, uh, I thought coffee was not good. How can you say that caffeine is?
Yeah, there it is in a big green circle. So
Yeah.
the big green circle means that there's been a big body of evidence around research, and it's that caffeine is a psychoactive drug, so it has a very quick impact on the brain. So when we put it in a positive, we mean that it does improve the brain's performance, but we're not saying that everybody should be glugging down liters of the stuff every day. The best advice really is if you need a spike, if there's something that you really need to do and you need a boost of energy, then caffeine does deliver that and delivers it well. But the trouble is that there are a lot of other things, as we all know, that caffeine does to the body which aren't so great. It has a very long half-life, so it stays in your system for many hours, which is why people generally say if you're going to drink caffeine, then have the last one towards the end of the afternoon, and because otherwise it keeps you awake. Because it sort of excites the brain, and so it can be very helpful and very useful when used as ever in moderation. So I'm glad that question was asked, because again, like speech, it can appear that it's a good thing. It's the same with sugary drinks. For a quick boost of energy, if you really need it, then a sugary drink will do that. But again, we don't want to be consuming liters and liters of sugary drinks, because we know there are lots of adverse health impacts from those as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. Thanks. Okay. This is a very interesting one from Kashif, who's asking: is there a difference between male and female brains when it comes to multitasking?
Well, there is that theory, isn't there, that women can and men can't. I don't remember there being a gender bias in the research that came through when we were looking at this. So I'm not aware of it. There may be, but it's not a part of the research that we saw. I think the best advice was universal, really, that and maybe it's I probably felt that I was able to multitask, but I think when I really critically looked at what I was doing, yes, I could keep several balls in the air and I could juggle them, but when I looked back at what I'd done, I hadn't done anything as well as I would wish to have done. So as ever, there's a trade-off, I suppose, between if I multitask, then I can get all of these things done, maybe 70% of what I would wish to do, and maybe that's okay. Maybe it depends on the types of tasks that they are. But if I'm trying to write a critical report that there's going to be a big focus on, and is being published next week, and I want this to be the best it can be, then really focusing and concentrating on it would give it its best chance of being the best it can be.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks. There is a question from Manoj Barai, who's asking, how do we train the brain to deal with uncertainties, both actual and perceived, in work situations?
Actual and perceived uncertainties. Yeah, I think that's probably getting into a bigger area of expertise than we've looked at here. I think some of this is about habits, some of it's about personality, and the ways that we personally deal with uncertainty. I think there are some things that we can train ourselves to do in a process sense, in a procedural sense, if we catch ourselves reacting in particular ways to particular types of uncertainties, perhaps looking back, in a prediction sense, what happened last time I was faced with something that I wasn't sure about. But for sure, certainty is one of the key things that our that tends to take a hit when we feel under threat. And so being aware of it, again, I think it's important that we are aware of the way that we respond to these things, and try to get into some good habits to address them.
Good habits, yeah. I mean, that actually leads to a question which I had in my mind. We're also running quickly out of time. Is that,
Okay.
We all know this in a way that we know that we're supposed to do a few things in life and not do a few things, right? But we never do it, Karen. I mean, why does it happen?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because the brain is wired for safety and is looking to save energy, and so habits are good. But they're also difficult to break, and it's sometimes it's more difficult to really seize upon new habits. And even though I think part of it is to do with motivation, part is to do with really understanding why we should make a change, and it's the what's in it for me if I do change. And so I think for us, trying to help people to understand the impact of some of these things. So it's not just that I know I should be drinking, but why should I be drinking? What's the impact that it's really going to have? And perhaps if I see some positive benefit, then I'll be more inclined to carry on maintaining that habit. But I think we just need constant reminders as well, and we need to perhaps set the odd timer in our calendar to go out for a walk, because we know we need to go out for a walk, but we don't prioritize the time. So what are the things, the little nudges that we can put in place? And just little things, if we can just incrementally change our behavior, it can be very beneficial.
Thanks, Karen. I think sadly that's all the time we have today. I mean, it's been an absolute pleasure and honor, I think, Karen, to speak with you.
Thank you, Partha.
But I think we are quite keen to go ahead. Karen is also very keen. So whoever is watching this, if you'd like us to actually, handle us, certain types of topics, you can write down you can write to me. That's my email ID, or you can write in the comment section as well what topics you'd like to be covered. I think by now you'd have understood Karen's expertise. Also, thank you very much, Karen, and thank you very much to the audience for actually coming and joining us this evening.
Absolutely. Thanks for those questions.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Especially when we know that today, I mean, you have 100 options to select from in terms of online things to do. So thanks so much for that. And before I go, I'd just like to tell you that maybe we'll not be going live for about 2 to 3 weeks because we're getting busy with something what you see on your screen just now, Workplace Week. This is actually 4 days of non-stop talks, discussions, tours to different workplaces across the globe, right from South America, North America, Europe, all the way to India. So if you'd like to see how corporations globally are actually kind of coping with the situation, the COVID situation, do go to their website just now, log in, and then try and register for whatever session is of interest to you. So till that time, thank you so much. Thanks, Karen, once again. Thanks everyone
Pleasure.
for listening, and stay safe. See you soon.